The creature towered over the shattered crates of medical supplies, its coiled body glistening with an iridescent sheen beneath the harsh lights of the cargo bay. Every motion of its tapering tail left a smear of venom across the floor, hissing slightly as it reacted with the alloy plating. The alien ambassador Kell stood rigid, 3 of his 4 limbs trembling. His eyes, each shifting hue giving away more panic than his rigid posture allowed, were locked on the creature's fangs. None of the crew spoke. No one dared to move. Then the human arrived. Wesley Zane ducked under a half-collapsed beam with a limping stride and a roll of his shoulder that suggested he'd had worse mornings. His uniform was stained with dust and coolant, a rip across his right sleeve revealing a network of pale scars. He chewed on the inside of his cheek as he looked at the creature, then at the frozen aliens around him. "That thing causing all the fuss?" Wesley asked, scratching lightly at his jaw. Kell turned to him, his voice tight. "It is a Viralian spirefang. The venom is lethal. 1 drop can paralyze a being of my physiology in seconds. It escaped containment during the crash." Wesley nodded slowly, stepping forward despite the warning hiss the creature gave. "I see. You must not approach." Kell extended an arm, barring his way. "It has already wounded one of our technicians. He is in critical condition." Wesley stopped just short of the venom trail, crouching low to get a better look at the creature's coiled form. He whistled, low and impressed. "Yeah, it's a nasty one. Reminds me of a cross between a coral snake and a rattler." Kell's expression twisted. "You recognize this species?" "No," Wesley replied, rising, "but I've handled snakes since I was a kid." There was a moment of silence in the cargo bay, long and heavy. The aliens didn't move. The Viralian spirefang did. Its tail twitched, its upper body rising slightly, tongue flicking out in a slow, menacing rhythm. Kell's gaze darted between the human and the creature. "You misunderstand. This is not a terrestrial reptile. Its venom is designed to bypass neural inhibitors. 1 sting can cause seizures, organ collapse." "I get it," Wesley cut in. "It's dangerous. But it's still got a pattern. You see the way it's coiled? That's defensive. It's scared, not aggressive." Kell looked at the smeared venom across the floor. "It has already attacked." "Yeah, well, so would I if I woke up from cryo in a busted cage surrounded by aliens yelling and waving laser cutters." Wesley stepped forward slowly. The alien gasped. "Do not." "Eshachach," Wesley said quietly. "Let me work." He dropped his utility pack beside him and pulled out a thin rod, telescoping it out to a full meter. At the end, a loop flicked out, flexible and resistant. The aliens watched in horrified fascination as he circled to the creature's side. "Come on, buddy," Wesley murmured. "Not your fault. You're just scared. I get it." The spirefang's head tracked him, tongue flicking faster now. Wesley crouched again, his movements slow, deliberate. He waited for the tail to twitch just once more, then he struck. With a practiced motion, the loop slipped over the creature's head and tightened. The spirefang thrashed violently, tail whipping, but Wesley held on, directing its movements with calm control. In 30 seconds, it was secure. He exhaled through his nose and stood. "All right." "Where do you want it?" Kell blinked, chest rising in a sharp inhale. "You subdued it." "Yeah," Wesley said, panting slightly. "Didn't think I'd be doing this today, but here we are." Kell gestured to a containment case being lowered from the upper deck. Wesley guided the creature toward it gently. When it was safely locked inside, the entire bay seemed to exhale in unison. Another alien, a medic with a pale green face and deep-set eyes, approached. "You did not even wear protective gear. If it had struck..." "I know," Wesley said. "Believe me, I know." Kell followed him out of the bay. "You must explain. How did you know what to do?" Wesley wiped his hands clean on a towel hanging from his belt. "I grew up in Florida. Swamps, woods, the Gulf. You learn early on what bites and what doesn't. My granddad ran a rehab center for injured wildlife. I've handled cottonmouths, copperheads, even a couple eastern diamondbacks. This one was just bigger." Kell processed that in silence. "You humans. You adapt to threats by embracing them." "Sometimes," Wesley said, wincing slightly as he rolled his shoulder. Sometimes we just don't know when to back down. The technician who'd been bitten Yorick was stabilized, but barely. The venom had caused convulsions and rapid neural deterioration. Wesley visited the medbay that evening, leaning against the wall as the alien doctor administered another round of muscle inhibitors. "How's he doing?" Wesley asked. "Still unstable," the medic replied, "but his vitals are responding to plasma dialysis." "We believe most of the venom has been filtered," Wesley nodded. "Glad to hear it." Back in his quarters, he collapsed onto the bunk. His muscles ached and the adrenaline crash hit him like a freight train. He barely noticed when the lights dimmed for sleep cycle. 2 days later, the Spirefang's behavior was being studied under secure conditions. Wesley was brought in as a consultant, much to his own surprise. After all, he wasn't a xenobiologist, but the crew considered him an expert now in the most bizarre way. As he stood beside the containment field, he watched the creature slither slowly in a loop around its enclosure. "You said it was afraid," Kell said, joining him. "It still is," Wesley replied. "How can you tell? It's not trying to escape. It's looking for shelter. See that movement?" "That's nesting behavior." "Curious," Kell murmured. "We believed it to be inherently aggressive." "Well," Wesley said, "so are pit bulls until you raise one right." On the 4th day, alarms blared again. This time, it wasn't the Spirefang. A hull breach in the environmental section had released a different kind of containment issue, one that involved atmospheric instability and toxic gas exposure. Wesley was already sprinting toward the central shaft when the call came through. "We have a crew member trapped in Section Blue 7. Who is it?" Wesley asked, grabbing a rebreather mask from the wall. "Kedgen. He was repairing the filtration unit when the breach occurred." Wesley reached the hatch, forcing it open with a pry bar. The gas inside was thick and yellowish, venting from a fractured tube. He dropped low, crawling under the cloud. Kedgen was on the floor, coughing violently, eyes watering. "Don't move," Wesley said, sliding a filter mask onto the alien's face. Kedgen tried to speak, but only wheezed. Wesley pulled him across the floor, one hand on his own mask. The gas stung his eyes. His lungs burned. But he kept dragging until he collapsed out into the corridor with the alien in tow. Medics rushed in. Kell was there too, helping lift Kedgen onto a stretcher. Wesley leaned against the wall, coughing. "Someone's gotta teach you guys about OSHA." Kell studied him. "You willingly entered a toxic cloud to save a crewmate." "I didn't see anyone else jumping in," Wesley said hoarsely. "You risked damage to your own lungs." "Yeah, well," he said, voice cracking, "I've handled worse since I was a kid." By the end of the week, Wesley was a minor legend aboard the ship, not because he was fearless, he wasn't, not because he was invincible, he definitely wasn't, but because he kept doing things that defied what the aliens thought was rational behavior. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He just kept showing up when things got ugly, when it got dangerous, when someone needed to act. And every time he did, someone inevitably asked him how he wasn't afraid. And every time he just shrugged and said the same thing. "I've handled snakes since I was a kid." Wesley sat hunched over a tray in the mess hall, poking at something that looked like blue lentils but smelled faintly like burnt rubber. There was a bite on his wrist, red and angry looking, with the faint outline of a fang. He was ignoring it, or at least trying to, while crumbling what passed for a cracker over his food. The ambient hum of the galley barely masked the low conversations of passing crew members, most of them alien, most of them stealing glances at him. Across from him, a short, lime-skinned engineer named Vel dropped into the seat without asking. "You should have reported that," Vel said, tapping 2 fingers against the table near Wesley's wrist. "It's not deep," Wesley replied, nudging the tray aside. "Didn't even get through the dermis." "Your dermis is swelling," Vel said. "And you're sweating like a trillion spore farmer in solar season." "Good metabolism," Wesley muttered, wiping his forehead with a sleeve that didn't look remotely clean. Vel leaned closer. "You're not invincible, you're just stubborn." Those are different things. Wesley took another bite of the blue stuff, chewed, and immediately regretted it. Why are you still talking to me if you think I'm an idiot? Because you're contagious, not biologically, culturally. Crew members are starting to imitate you. That's a problem. Wesley raised an eyebrow. You mean acting without waiting for a committee to vote on it? I mean rushing into toxic gas clouds with nothing but lungs and optimism, Vel snapped. Kedjan's recovering, but if you'd collapsed in there too, we'd be hauling out 2 bodies. Wesley didn't respond right away. He looked down at the tray, then pushed it away entirely. I didn't do it to make a point. No, Vel said, standing. But you made one anyway. He walked off, leaving Wesley with a throbbing wrist and a room full of glances that didn't feel quite like admiration. Later that cycle, Wesley finally dragged himself to the infirmary. The med bay was dimly lit, more for the comfort of the nocturnal species than any aesthetic. He wandered past a curtain of sterilization mist and waved lazily at the attending nurse, who was shaped like a boulder with antennae. I need a quick look at this, he said, holding up his arm. The medic didn't need to. A flat orange light scanned the wound, then blinked twice in rapid succession. You've got localized necrosis, the medic said, voice filtered through a translator node that buzzed slightly on the R, and mild systemic toxicity. Sit. Wesley dropped onto the nearest bench. The medic prepared a hypo injection and glanced at him. You waited over 30 hours to report this, didn't think it was that bad. You're wrong. He winced as the needle sunk into his forearm. Pain level, the medic asked. 7 out of 10. That's not helpful. Human scales are wildly erratic. Your species says 7 when you're bleeding out. Wesley gave a weak laugh. Fair enough. The medic began applying a bio-cauterizing gel which hissed faintly and smelled like scorched pepper. Wesley's jaw locked, but he didn't move. Next time, the medic said, you report immediately. The venom in that creature is not well documented. You're lucky your blood chemistry isn't more reactive. Lucky's one word for it. The medic paused. You show a high tolerance for physical distress. But that's not the same as resilience. Wesley looked at him. You're saying I'm reckless. I'm saying your pain threshold may be misleading you into thinking you're fine when you're not. Psychological fatigue, organ strain, fluid imbalance, all possible. You need rest. Wesley nodded once slowly. I'll sleep when we're not leaking gas or getting attacked by angry reptiles. You'll sleep now, the medic said, tapping something on his console. That injection included a mild sedative. Wesley blinked, then narrowed his eyes. That's dirty pool. The medic's expression didn't change. You'll thank me when you wake up. Wesley was already slumping sideways on the bench. He woke 8 hours later to the soft buzz of the infirmary's overhead lights and the sharp, unpleasant taste of recycled air. His arm felt better, though now it itched like hell under the bandage. He sat up, blinking against the brightness. There was someone else in the room. Kel stood at the far end, examining a chart on a transparent panel that hovered beside a diagnostic unit. His posture was more relaxed than usual, though still rigid compared to any human standard. Morning, Wesley said, rubbing his eyes. It is the second rest cycle interval, Kel replied, not looking up. Your internal clock is likely misaligned. Wouldn't be the first time, Wesley muttered. Kel finally turned. You've become something of a phenomenon among the crew. I was hoping for cautionary tale, Wesley said. Keeps expectations low. Kel walked over. Your behavior has prompted debates in our internal ethics forums. Sounds riveting. One faction believes your actions are irrational and dangerous. Another believes they exemplify an emergent survival paradigm. Which side are you on? Kel considered the question. I find you difficult to categorize. You disregard standard protocols, yet consistently produce results. You appear flippant, yet demonstrate tactical awareness. You speak casually of threats that terrify others. And you tolerate pain levels that would incapacitate most species aboard. Wesley scratched the inside of his elbow. That's just being human. We get by, we adapt, we joke when we're scared, sometimes we bluff, sometimes we don't. Kel tilted his head. You risked permanent damage by delaying treatment. Wasn't my best call, Wesley admitted, but I've gone longer with worse. Kel said nothing for a long moment. Then, I have reviewed Earth's recorded fauna. Your planet is hostile to an absurd degree. We call it character building. You have spiders that mimic other spiders, frogs that freeze and reanimate, mammals that lay eggs, acidic plants, rogue weather systems. You forgot the bears, Kel stared at him. Bears, big furry things. Stronger than they look, some of them can open car doors. Kel closed his eyes briefly. I am beginning to understand why your species evolved the way it did. Wesley swung his legs off the bench. We never had a choice. We weren't the strongest or the fastest. So we had to get creative. Kel studied him. You treat danger like a puzzle. Sometimes it is. And when it isn't, then I run or fight or throw something heavy and hope it works out. Kel seemed to accept this answer, though his expression remained unreadable. There is a damage control briefing in 20 minutes. We would benefit from your presence. Wesley stood, stretching. You asking me to sit in on a strategy meeting? I am suggesting that your perspective may offer useful insights. Translation, you want me to explain how I'd survive something without blowing myself up? If possible, yes, Wesley grinned. All right, but I'm bringing coffee, Kel hesitated. The dark stimulant compound, exactly. It smells like engine lubricant. Tastes better, though, barely. As they exited the medbay, Vel passed by, carrying a diagnostic scanner tucked under one arm. He glanced at Wesley's bandaged wrist. You finally got that looked at. Against my will, Wesley said. Good. Now maybe you'll live long enough to be annoying in more meetings. Kel nodded. He has already agreed to attend, Vel sighed. Of course he has. They made their way down the corridor, past a cluster of engineers replacing a shattered conduit. Wesley noticed one of them, a tall, feathered technician mimicking the way he looped a tool tether through his belt. He didn't say anything. Yet again, he was being imitated. Not out of admiration, necessarily, but because he had survived, and because, apparently, that was more contagious than anyone expected. 5 days after the Spirefang incident, Wesley found himself wedged beneath a sloped maintenance panel in Subdeck 3, elbow deep in an overheating coolant manifold. The repair wasn't strictly in his job description, but the actual systems tech had fainted from heat stress 20 minutes earlier, and the only other person nearby had 6 fingers and no idea what a spanner was. He grunted as he twisted the pressure regulator back into place, steam curling around his forearms. The air down here was thick, humid, and smelled faintly like burnt algae. Hold the valve steady, he said without looking up. I am, replied a voice with a wet, warbling undertone. But your tools lack grip for my digits. Yeah, well, your digits lack opposable thumbs. The alien assisting him, a lichen-skinned mechanic named Troon, clicked his throat twice, a sound that Wesley had come to recognize as mild offense. I possess high dexterity. It is your wrench that is inefficient. It's a crescent wrench and it's designed for hands like mine, Wesley said, shifting his weight to jam his shoulder against a loose bracket. Use the strap on the handle. Troon adjusted his grip, and the valve clicked into place with a satisfying hiss. Wesley slid out from under the panel, his shirt clinging to him like a second skin. He wiped his face with the inside of his collar and sat up slowly, wincing as his hip cracked. This entire subdeck was never meant to run on backup generators for this long. The coolant lines weren't built for that kind of pressure cycling. Troon leaned back on his haunches. Then why did you not say so earlier? Because I didn't know the pressure was fluctuating until the panel almost melted off the wall. You do not have detailed schematics. No one does. The crash corrupted the main systems archive. We're running blind in half the decks. Troon's eyes, small, round, and recessed, turned toward the vent above them. Then how are you navigating these repairs? Experience. Guesswork. And a healthy fear of fire. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them dripping sweat into the grated floor. Troon adjusted the pouch at his hip. You lack caution but possess competence. It is confusing. Wesley leaned his head against the wall behind him. I get that a lot. Outside the access crawl, the corridor lights flickered. A low vibration echoed through the floor plates, not an alarm, but something close. Troon stood, his back unfolding in a series of ridged joints. That was a pressure shift. Yeah, Wesley said. We just bought ourselves a few more hours. Troon tilted his head. You say that like it's good news. It is. Now I can go get this rash looked at. He peeled back the edge of his collar. The skin beneath was blotchy, red, and starting to blister in uneven patches. Troon leaned forward, sniffed once, and recoiled. That is not a normal human scent. It's heat rash from recycled vapor coolant, or maybe a fungal thing. Either way, it itches like hell. Medical bay? Yeah. Before I start shedding skin like a snake in a microwave. They parted ways at the lift junction, and Wesley headed toward the infirmary, walking with a stiff gait and trying not to scratch. The corridor was quiet, save for the clunk of his boots and the occasional overhead hiss of stabilizers compensating for another micro-fracture in the hull. The medic on duty was a tall, translucent-skinned being named Eric, whose face looked like it had been carved from melted glass. He took one look at Wesley's neck and gestured without speaking. Yeah, I know, Wesley said, climbing onto the examination platform. I should have come sooner. I wasn't going to say that, Eric said, scanning the rash with a handheld probe. I was going to say we've seen 3 other cases today. The filtration units on the lower deck are seeding spores into the ventilation system, so it's not just me. No, but yours is the worst by far. You've got a secondary reaction. Great. I win again. Eric applied a thin layer of a cooling gel that turned Wesley's skin a faint green. It stung, then numbed. Any dizziness? Eric asked. Just the normal kind. Appetite loss, fever. Hallucinations. Only when I talked to Troon. Eric didn't laugh, he never did, but the corners of his eyes crinkled slightly. You'll need to stay overnight. We have to flush your lymphatic system. I've got things to fix. You've got a compromised immune response and elevated histamine levels. If you keep pushing through, you'll collapse. Wesley stared at the ceiling for a long beat. Fine, one night, Eric nodded. We've adjusted the bed to human spinal alignment. Luxury. The next morning, Wesley woke to find a tray of food beside his bed, and a note written in blocky, awkward lettering from someone named Rin who thanked him for unclogging the waste processor last week. There was a small drawing at the bottom, a 2-legged stick figure holding what looked like a wrench. He ate the food in silence. Kel visited shortly after second cycle began, his posture unusually relaxed for someone who always seemed like he was bracing for disaster. You were exposed to airborne spores, apparently. Good news is I'm unlikely to mutate. Kel studied the chart at the bedside. You're recovering. Eric says I'll be fine by end of cycle. Kel set the chart down. We've rerouted the filtration to bypass subdeck 3. The spores should clear within 2 days. Good, that deck's already a sauna. Kel hesitated. I've spoken with the command committee. They want you reassigned temporarily to hazard analysis. Wesley raised an eyebrow. Is that a demotion or a promotion? Neither. It's a request for you to do what you've been doing, but officially. And what exactly is that? Identifying problems before they become crises. You have instincts we lack. Wesley sat up straighter. I'm flattered, but I'm still an engineer. You'd retain your title. But you'd have authority to override non-critical protocols in high-risk zones. So you want me to be a walking red flag? Kel's mouth twitched. A functional one. Wesley considered it. All right, but I'm not wearing a special uniform. Noted. By mid-cycle, he was back on his feet. The rash had receded, and the medics cleared him with a warning to hydrate and stay out of vapor-sealed areas for at least 20 hours. His first assignment under the new role took him to a damaged relay hub near the aft thrusters. The readings showed mild ozone leakage, not immediately dangerous, but enough to cause electrical interference. Wesley brought 2 techs and a portable buffer shield, and within the hour they'd stabilized the conduit. "You think this'll hold?" one of the techs asked. "Long enough for someone smarter than me to build a permanent fix." They laughed. Wesley didn't. Later, he walked the perimeter of the ship's hull via the observation deck. The stars outside glittered like broken glass. He paused near the viewport, resting a hand on the railing. Kell joined him a moment later. "Reports say the ship's stability has improved," Kell said. "For now, you seem different." "I'm tired," Wesley said. "Not just physically. It's like I'm waiting for the next thing to go wrong, then rest." "While you can." "I don't think humans are built for that," Kell looked at him. "You underestimate your own capacity." Wesley shook his head. "No, I just know where the cracks are." They stood in silence, watching the stars. "You know," Wesley said at last, "I never wanted to be the guy people call when something explodes. And yet you are." "Yeah, guess I've handled worse. No venom this time, not the kind you can suck out." Kell turned toward the viewport. "Then perhaps we are safe." "At least for now." Wesley nodded, finally letting his shoulders drop. For once, nothing needed fixing.